This is CBC Vancouver News.
That is what goes through our mind. Like, what if it happens again?
Commuters on edge after a random stabbing on a Surrey bus that left a man with life-threatening injuries.
We just had such a good time together, and I'm so honored that he was in my life.
Friends and family remember broadcast icon and rock and roll DJ Red Robinson.
The pandemic caused one surge, then the increase in food prices has caused another.
Worm composting, why more and more British Columbians are turning to these Wrigley workers to give kitchen waste a new life. Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. Some commuters in Surrey are on edge today after a stabbing on a bus yesterday left a man with life-threatening injuries. As the CBC's Susanna De Silva reports, the suspect had allegedly tried to attack someone else before the incident. And a warning, this story contains details about violence.
It's at this bus stop behind me where a man needed life-saving treatment after being slashed in the throat in what appears to be a random assault. Now, transit police say it actually all began about 4 blocks away from here, where they say a suspect approached someone waiting for a bus, brandished a knife, held that knife to the victim's throat before that person was able to run away and call police. Transit police then allege the suspect was able to board a bus, and that's where they allege he slashed the throat of a man in his 30s. The bus pulled over here. That man was treated and taken to hospital for surgery. The suspect was then arrested nearby. But it is troubling news for those who regularly take the bus and say they generally do feel safe.
And I saw yesterday, I was very scared. You know, we always have to go and come from this road. So, but hope so. This will not happen again.
After yesterday, it's kind of hard now because that is what goes through our mind. Like, what if it happens again? But let's just hope for the best.
No, I generally say feel because I haven't faced any incident like that.
Transit police say the victim has had surgery and is expected to survive. They are going to be recommending charges of attempted murder against the suspect, who they say is not known to police. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Surrey.
A shooting in the small community of Sardis in Chilliwack has left 1 man dead and a second injured. RCMP responded to reports of a shooting near the Watson Road area just before 7 on Saturday night. 1 man was found dead in a cemetery. A second man was located nearby, suffering from serious injuries. He was transported to hospital. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team is now on the case. And while it's still early in its investigations, they believe the shooting related to the Lower Mainland gang conflict. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. The family of a young Surrey father and filmmaker who was killed last year after a fight with a neighbor won't be heading to court. Crown Counsel says no charges will be laid. Manbir or Mani Amar was killed last August. Homicide investigators say they recommended a charge to the BC Prosecution Service. But on Friday, the service confirmed that it would not be approving charges in this case, saying the evidence did not meet the standards of a 2-part test. Police are not looking to gather new evidence, and CBC News has been unable so far to contact Amar's family for reaction. Following his death, more than $16,000 was raised online for the care of his 3 young children. He interviewed the Beatles, hung out backstage with Elvis Presley, and called Johnny Cash a friend. The generations who knew and loved iconic Vancouver disc jockey Red Robinson is remembering his legacy. His family says Robinson died yesterday after a brief illness at the age of 86. He began his radio career in 1954 at Vancouver's CJOR. But as Yasmin Gandam tells us, his influence is still being felt today.
Hi, this is Red Robinson from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you're listening to the Rock and Roll Reunion.
That voice recognizable to generations. In his upcoming radio show, Michael Godin will be paying tribute to his lifelong friend and legend, Red Robinson. He's dug up tape from his archives.
Red will be here.
Hi, Red. How are you, Michael? I'm doing just great, thank you. I'm doing fine. Those birds are starting to get to me in the background.
See, Red's sense of humor was always present, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this for the first time since 2001.
Godin says although Robinson is gone, he will hold on to their memories forever.
We always had this great passion for what we loved to do, and we had a great passion for having a good time together. I remember sometimes on lunchtime we would get in the car and drive to the White Spot on West 4th and go have curb service in the car and listen to radio.
Godin had planned to see his friend Saturday morning before he passed away.
I think that one of the things that's so wonderful about Red was just how giving he was. He didn't have to know the person if they wanted to stop and chat on the street, which happened all the time because he was so recognizable.
Robinson was the first DJ in the country to play Elvis Presley records and famously emceed Presley and the Beatles' only concerts in Vancouver. His iconic 60-plus year career put him in the BC and Canadian Halls of Fame.
Back to the talent section of things, ladies and gentlemen.
In a statement online, Robinson's two children, Kelly and Sherry, say they spent his final moments with their father, along with his brother Bill. As beloved as he was by the public, they say he was even more so at home, as a devoted father, grandfather, and loving husband to their late mom, Carol. Robinson's impact is profound, with many public figures sending condolences, some remembering his influence on their broadcasting career.
He took me under his wing and saw something in me, and he was an icon to me, a hero. And I learned so much from him, not only just about the business, but just about life and being a nice human being. He was definitely a nice man.
Robinson, a familiar face and voice for many. But for Godin, he will always be remembered as his best friend.
And this photo here was cool because in the original photo, Red reproduced it with a copy of the poster with his hand on his cheek. It's really cool.
Yasmin Gantam, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC government says it is working on regulating short-term rental platforms like Airbnb. The platforms have been under increased scrutiny after a deadly fire at an illegal Airbnb in Montreal.
If you shift that onus to the platforms and if you start finding the platforms and holding them accountable, I think that is the way forward, because in some European countries, the platforms can be fined up to, I think, close to $1 million Canadian per infraction.
In BC, most short-term rental legislation is handled by cities and municipalities, but the province thinks they need more help with enforcement and may consider wider legislation. The government says it is looking at the regulations around platforms like Uber and Lyft in order to determine how to best regulate apps like Airbnb. The company did not respond to a request for comment. Well, the 2023 Canadian Stick Curling Championships wrapped up in Nanaimo today, with 72 teams from across Canada competing for a top prize in a modified version of the sport. Claire Palmer reports the championship welcomed teams from 9 of 10 provinces and hundreds of players across abilities.
This isn't your typical curling. This game was developed by curlers to keep everyone in the game longer. The stick makes it more accessible without using the traditional slide delivery.
One of my teammates was not going to be able to curl orthodox any longer, and because of that, we stepped into stick curling and we had a gas, and it's been part of our lives ever since.
It really does extend your curling career, and I can still throw orthodox, but after a game, I'm in pain for a lot of days. With this, I can play 4 games in a day if you want.
It's also an integrated game for those with varying abilities.
And I love that this is an integrated sport, and so that we can, compete against the able-bodied people and showcase that, we're just as competitive as able-bodied people.
Every province but Newfoundland was accounted for in Nanaimo this weekend. Fans and players alike taking in the 4-day tournament. These sisters were going for gold representing Alberta.
Oh, it's been amazing. This has been an amazing time. We've just really, really enjoyed ourselves. So many nice people, so well organized. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, they put on a phenomenal bonspiel. It is great. Everything has been just wonderful.
Hosting the championship has been great exposure for the Nanaimo Curling Club. They struggled to see numbers bounce back after the pandemic, but there's been renewed interest over the course of the tournament.
It's very, very exciting for us. It's making the event is making so much life in the club, and we're really happy to welcome all these teams. It's been very exciting.
2 teams were crowned today in the Open and Women's division. Nova Scotia's Landry and Bennett won gold in the Open division, and BC duo Radcliffe and Richard took the top prize in the women's category. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
They're slimy and they come with a bit of an egg factor, but the use of the industrious and always hungry earthworm that gives kitchen waste a whole new life is catching on. Vermicomposting or worm composting developed a following for home use during the pandemic. But as Janella Hamilton reports, rising food costs have created an explosion of interest.
Anna Piccolo's home garden is packed with bountiful produce.
And these are the smaller bulbs.
But she can't take all the credit. She has a little extra help from these busy workers.
They're aerating, they're feeding the soil food web, and making your plant nutrients available.
Using worms may not be for the faint of heart, but Piccolo says the soil has made her garden more drought tolerant and produces higher yields.
My garlic, I would say, doubled in size. It still stores beautifully. The flavor is phenomenal.
Her worms come from this Chilliwack farm, where the owners harvest the worm castings.
In the gut of the worm, it produces a growth hormone called auxin. When you put that in touch with a plant, you get about a 30% increase in the size of that root ball. Big roots, it means it can get access to more water, more nutrients.
Vermicomposting or worm composting is a process where worms eat green waste, which then passes through their tiny bodies and turns into worm manure.
Just as a reminder, the worms do not like the light. They do not want to leave this system.
Cousins says the appeal of worm composting for home use grew during the pandemic, and now with an affordability crisis and rising food costs.
The pandemic caused one surge, then the increase in food prices has caused another probably equal surge.
Cousins, who has inflammatory bowel disease, says incorporating organic, nutrient-dense worm composting helps cut back on food waste, save money, and is healthier.
When you harvest something and you let it, ship it, about 3 days later or so, there's a significant drop in the nutrients that are available in the plant.
I've got some big fat red wrigglers, and they've already begun to break down my kitchen waste.
Piccolo says it couldn't be any easier.
You just add a layer of it and it does itself. Nature knows what it's doing.
Worm compost bins can be placed in backyards, balconies, and basements. And if you're like the cousins, right in your kitchen. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Chilliwack.
To a heart-stopping rescue, a skier is being hailed as a hero after saving the life of a snowboarder buried deep in snow.
Hey, you all right? Can you hear me?
That is Francis Zuber digging out snowboarder Ian Zager in the backcountry of Mount Baker, just south of the border in Washington state. He was skiing out of bounds when a flash of red caught his eye. That was a snowboard, and it set off a desperate dig to get Zager out.
Come on, help me out. Help me out here. You okay? You all right? Okay, you're good. You're good, I got you. You okay? Can you breathe?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. We're both gonna catch our breath for a sec. I'm gonna help dig you out, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Zuber estimates Steger was in at least 5 to 6 feet deep of snow, and the most frightening moment was that tough climb uphill just to get to him.
As much work as it was, and way more than I expected, when I finally got to him and cleared his airway, and he was conscious still, he was able to talk to me. That was a huge relief, like knowing that he was going to be okay. It probably felt like a lifetime for him while he was buried under the snow in the Me getting to him took 2.5 minutes. So we figure somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes. So he was probably, maybe either a third or just to the halfway point of his possible survival time in there.
The pair have since become friends and even recently skied Mount Baker together. Steger declined an interview, but he says he is just trying to enjoy being alive. Anticipation is building for an unprecedented moment in the U.S. as Donald Trump is set to become the first former president to face criminal charges. That story is next. After 8 bodies were pulled from the St. Lawrence River earlier this week, the search continues for a missing person. The First Nations community of Akwesasne is bracing for another grim discovery. As the CBC's Katie Nicholson reports, we are learning more about the victims and what might have brought them to the river's edge.
A helicopter swoops low, searching the marsh. The beat of its blades, a steady reminder of tragedy.
It's like a big dark cloud over the res right now, so it's like, hopefully everybody gets through this shit.
It's been just a few short days since 8 bodies were pulled from these waters. People hoping for a new start in the U.S. Like Florin Iordake, who was refused asylum in Canada and was set to be deported. Family members planned to pick him and his young family up in New York. Now they are working on repatriating their bodies back to Romania. Iordache's children were baptized in this Toronto church.
They're a young family that walked in and wanting to baptize their children. And of course, we received them gladly.
And then there's the Chaudhry family, whose deaths in the ice-cold river are making headlines in their home state in India, Gujarat. But there is one person who still hasn't been found, Casey Oakes, last seen boarding a small boat like the one recovered near the bodies. Just one of many unanswered questions lingering with the grief felt deeply in this community.
Oh, sad, especially the babies and little children. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, everybody's emotional probably right now.
And so they pull together. For Alice Thompson, that means making chicken noodle soup.
Just get together, help everybody out.
A small gesture to warm the crews, still out searching on the frigid water. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Akwesasne.
In 2 days, the U.S. witnesses something it's never seen before, a former president facing criminal charges. And what that moment may bring has many on edge. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
Another layer of security arrives near the Lower Manhattan courthouse. Authorities don't know exactly what to expect on Tuesday, so they're adding more barricades and making themselves visible ahead of the historic moment poised to take place here.
Hopefully this will be as painless and classy as possible.
The 45th president!
Trump is expected to fly on his private plane from Florida to New York on Monday.
Trump!
After he is arraigned and released on Tuesday, he'll return to Mar-a-Lago where he'll deliver a speech. The details of what happens inside this courthouse, including whether there will be a mugshot and handcuffs, it's all still being negotiated. The only thing Trump's lawyer says is certain is that he will fight these charges vigorously.
We will very loudly and proudly say not guilty.
Thank you, President Trump. Supporters are rallying behind the former president. Donations to his re-election campaign surged, with more than $4 million collected in the 24 hours after his indictment was announced.
I think the American people see that. It's the very essence of the abuse of the prosecutive function, which is pursuing a person rather than pursuing a real crime.
Trump is being defended by most Republicans, even those who have criticized him in the past, as they accuse the district attorney, Democrat Alvin Bragg, of political bias.
It's just a banana republic that we're living in now in the United States of America.
Some Trump voters came down to the courthouse to check out the media spectacle that's taken over the block.
Yeah, I just wanted to take some photos.
It's also attracted curious tourists wanting to see history firsthand.
I think for a lot of people feel like this has been a long time coming, like there's been a lot of scandal surrounding, former President Trump, so not really surprised, to be honest.
Donald Trump called for protests and had suggested there could be violence if he is indicted. After what happened on January 6th, those kinds of statements have to be taken very seriously. But so far, any demonstrations and protests in New York City have been small and peaceful. Katie Simpson, CBC News, New York.
A prominent Russian backer of the Ukraine war has been killed in an apparent assassination. It happened in St. Petersburg in an explosion inside a cafe. Vladimir Tatarsky was a pro-war blogger posting reports from the front lines. In one video, he boasted Russia would kill and rob Ukraine as it pleased. Reports say Tatarsky was giving an address and was handed the explosive hidden in a figurine. Russia is blaming Ukraine, but Ukraine denies any involvement. Well, tomorrow is a big day in the quest to return to the moon. NASA and the Canadian Space Agency will unveil the names of the astronauts who will be part of the first landing since 1972. A NASA video is promoting the mission set to blast off in November of 2024. 4 astronauts, including a Canadian, will loop around the moon during the first ever human lunar mission since Apollo 17. It's hoped the return will be permanent and serve as a potential launch pad to Mars. There's your live shot of City Hall and Cambie Street on a much calmer evening than that hail we saw this afternoon. The 18th Annual Canadian Folk Music Awards is in town. I'll have results for you. That's next. Our city was folk music central this weekend as artists from across the country gathered in Vancouver for the 18th Annual Canadian Folk Music Awards.
Spring breeze, rushing stream.
It was 3 days of live performances, nominee showcases, and awards concerts, all culminating into tonight's awards held at St. James Community Square. Awards were handed out for Emerging Artist of the Year, as well as Ensemble and Soloist of the Year. But organizers say even nominations mean something.
And those that are in nomination, it's such a nice pat on the back to say, you know, we underline that, yes, you have done a great job. We think that, you know, your project stands out. It's kind of like getting a certificate that says, yes, officially you are an artist.
BC string band duo Alison de Groot and Tatiana Hargreaves won 2 awards for Instrumental and Traditional Album of the Year. Big congrats to them. Looked like a very fun weekend. And that does it for us this weekend. That's your late news for this Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/BC. And if I don't see you before next weekend, have a great Easter. See you.